Hi guys, welcome back to the Card Combo Show with me, Chocobilly, where we look at the weird and wonderful card combinations in the Final Fantasy TCG, episode 68, and we just breached 300 subscribers, so wow, that's amazing! Thank you ever so much, guys, that's just incredible. The fact that I've got 300 people watching my videos is just insane. Anyway, let's get to it. This week I am looking at cards that revive other cards from the break zone. Not too bad, eh? Alright, this week I'm going to be looking at Noctis from Opus 14, Faris from Opus 15, Ace from Opus 15, Arc from Opus 10, and finally Mont Leonis from Opus 14, so a lot of 14s and 15s out there. Okay, first we've got Noctis. He's an Earth backup with Dull. Put Noctis into the break zone. Choose one category, 15 forward. It costs 5 or less in your break zone. Play it onto the field. You can only use this ability during your turn. So a lot of very powerful cards that he can bring onto the field for effectively free, as long as it's on your turn. So, I'm going to get into the obvious one first, which is Regis. Regis is an incredibly good card. When Regis enters the field, choose up to 2 forwards in your break zone other than card name Regis, Light or Dark, and put them in your break zone from the field on this. Oh my god, I butchered that, didn't I? Basically, he gets to play 2 forwards that put into the field, put into the break zone this turn onto the field when he comes onto the field. And then he's got his Royal Sigil S, which I don't really care about. So basically, you can have 2 forwards, leave the field, and then at the end of your turn, you play Regis to then bring them back onto the field. So if they have good enter or leave the field abilities, then he is a perfect card to mix with those. So a common one he gets played with is Kefka, because you can make Kefka free by putting 3 forwards or monsters you control from the field into the break zone to then play him onto the field, and then he gets to break something as well. So you can put Regis and 2 other forwards into the break zone to play Kefka onto the field for free. You then break Noctis to bring in Regis, who will then bring in the other 2 forwards that broke with Kefka. So really, really good. Now, forwards that he could bring in, something like Wall or Mont Leonis, both of which also play forwards on the field. Mont Leonis being a fantastic card because he can play an Earth forward of 6 or less from your break zone back onto the field. And you know, 6 is a pretty high cost, so that's a lot of good forwards he can bring onto the field. Talk about that later when we get to him. And then Wall, he can play any category Mobius forward from your hand. So that includes stuff like Yasmat, who's a 9 CP forward and is massive and does a lot of cool stuff. So yeah, the fact that you can effectively play or put 3 forwards into the break zone to break a forward in your opponent's field, then break your backup to bring in Regis, Wall, and Mont Leonis, who will then also bring in 2 more forwards, both of which will probably have really good effects as well. It's just, that's so incredibly good. Obviously, you want to be careful of things like Shantote when your opponent sees that and goes, nope, board wipe, but still, really good nonetheless. If they've got good entry effects, who cares? Right, so I will probably add this in post, but someone brought up a combo on the one of the FFTCG Facebook groups, and this is absolutely hilarious. It is basically a way to be able to infinitely loop Regis and Rinoa. So, the way it goes is you have Rinoa on the field, put her into the break zone. You then bring another Rinoa onto the field, put her into the break zone. You then use Regis, or you use Noctis potentially, to bring Regis onto the field. You can then select both Rinoas in your break zone. Now, obviously you can't have 2 of the same character on the field at the same time, and when an instance like that does happen, what happens is it's a rule processing similar to when a forward's power is reduced to 0, and they're just put into the break zone. They're not broken, they don't just pop, they just go shifted from one zone to another. But that doesn't stop their entry effects, and because there are no Rinoas currently on the field, it means that you can select 2 Rinoas in your break zone and play them onto the field. They will enter the field, their entry abilities will stack, and you get to choose 2 forwards, but they are instantly put from the field into the break zone. Now, when you bring both Rinoas in, you select Regis with one of the Rinoas, and you select another forward you have with the other Rinoa. So that means you get to constantly flicker Regis and the other forward, because Regis will flicker, when he enters, he gets to pick 2 forwards in the break zone, both Rinoas, they then come back in, select Regis and the other forward, they then get put into the break zone, Regis then flickers, brings the Rinoas back in, rinse and repeat until you win the game effectively. Now Regis does stay to choose up to 2 forwards as well, so it does mean that it's, you know, it's not an unbreakable infinite loop if neither you nor your opponent can interject. So Regis can choose no forwards in his break zone to not bring anything back in. So once you've kind of done what you want to do, at that point you can then move forwards. So there's a lot of cool forwards that you can do this with. Mont Leonis, again, because he can effectively just keep on flickering and bringing out all your Earth forwards from the break zone of 6 CP or less. Yeah, and basically this will keep on happening until you stop it, or until your opponent stops it. If your opponent can interject at any point, then, you know, they're not going to let this sort of thing happen, because it only requires you to have broken your 2 Renoas. Now, I say that's actually not the easiest thing to do in the world, but, excuse me, probably the easiest way to manufacture something like that would be Magic Pot. So if you had Renoa on the field and you used Magic Pot to put 1 Renoa into the break zone to bring the other one in, and then you have another means of breaking that Renoa, say through Deleter, or, you know, Earth's got plenty of ways of breaking your own forwards, that then Renoa goes into the break zone, and then all you've got to do is just play Regis and you're set. But yeah, Mont Leonis is a great forward to do with this. So is Sarah. So obviously Sarah can kind of choose forwards and they deal damage to each other, but what I'd much rather focus on is draw 1 card. Just keep on drawing cards. Just mill yourself. I mean, let's say you're 20 cards into your deck already and you just want, yeah, let's draw 30 cards. Then draw 30 cards. And the great thing about this as well is that you don't have to draw a card. So if you want to, you can then just finish Sarah off by saying choose Sarah and another bigger forward, and Sarah dies and you're fine. Then you've got 30 cards in your hand to then just do whatever you want with. Realm. So maybe you're in a monster focused deck and you just want to keep on bringing out all the monsters from your deck. Just keep on flickering Realm. Just keep on bringing all those monsters onto the field. I mean, you could have some of the ones that deal damage, or if you're in, I mean, that's literally 4 different elements on the screen right now. But, you know, there's just a lot of different elements that you could be bringing in, and lots of different monsters that can do lots of excellent things. So it's just, that's just funny. I do love monsters. Varn! Let's pretend you're at 5 damage for a moment, shall we? And you bring in Varn, he then reveals top 5 cards, play a forward of cost 3 or less, he reveals another top 5 cards, play a forward of cost 3 or less, flicker him, do it again. Just keep playing all the forwards from your deck. And obviously you will get to a point where there are, you know, not enough, or no more forwards in your deck, or no forwards that he can play at least. And, you know, that would just be absolutely amazing just to keep on playing all these forwards out of your deck. Obviously you need to kind of weigh it up, because you need to see what's actually in your break zone versus what could be in your deck and be like, actually, is this really going to work? And Lanny. Because who doesn't want to mill your opponent's deck outright? Yeah, as I said before, it's an infinite loop, so you can just keep on going Regis and Renoa with Lanny on the field and just, oh look, it's your opponent's top card, take it, take it, take it, and you can just rinse and repeat until your opponent has literally no deck left. And the moment that Lanny asks your opponent to go grab or to reveal a card from their deck and there is nothing there, you win. Not to mention the fact you also get to cast cards as well, so any summons you reveal, because you're kind of in the middle of a stack, means that you won't be able to play any forwards or anything, unless they have back attack. But any summons or anything like that, just cast it, which is quite funny, and it gets reduced cost as well. You can also do the same sort of thing with Thief, which when it enters the field, your opponent mills a card. Technically, you could do it with the Thief that when it leaves the field, your opponent mills a card as well, but, you know, they're equally as effective. I mean, I guess the first one is better because he's got slightly more power, so he's more likely to survive, maybe. But yeah, doing this with Lanny is just better because you get to use the cards that you reveal from your opponent's deck, and Lanny has a bit more staying power as well. But yeah, if you can bring in both Renoas using Regis with Lanny on the field, you win. And if your opponent can't eject, you can just keep milling your opponent until you win. It's crazy. Right, let's not just focus on the Regis plays here, because, you know, that's, yeah, whilst it's a great play, still kind of hard to do. So, Libertas. Being able to play Libertas on the field to then get something like Nyx out your break zone is just quite nice, to be honest. And this Noctis does fit into a kind of Klingslave deck if you are throwing some Earth in there as well, using something like Ignis to kind of give all your Kingslaves Brave and plus 1,000. But yeah, being able to play Libertas onto the field to get your Nyx, then play Nyx as well if you really want to, is a pretty decent and nice and effective way to recurse from your field. Versdale. So Versdale has a very niche kind of deck type based around him, but it is pretty good. And if you can play Versdale and get 3 cards to your hand just for breaking Noctis, that's also not so bad. I mean, playing Versdale from hand is fine, because if you get those 3 cards, which chances are you will, because that's how the deck will have been built, and then when he does eventually die, just Noctis to bring him back to get even more cards to hand. Now, it's kind of weird, because when you're playing a deck like this, it's add up to 3 characters of cost 5 or more, so it's not summons, so they are things that have to be used on your turn, like playing big forwards on your turn, which means it does fall prey to a lot of things like Shantoto, as I mentioned earlier, because they are ultimately, well, I say characters, obviously you've got your backups as well, but you can only have 5 of those, so it's going to be a lot of high-costed forwards, which means you're going to be investing a lot, and unless they're doing a lot for you and stopping your opponent from doing stuff, they will fall prey to board wipes, unfortunately. But still, really cool, and a nice way to add a bit more consistency to a Verstale deck. Ravis. So, when he enters the field or leaves the field, choose a forward, it is minus 5,000 power. So this, having Noctis and Ravis on the field at the same time, is a nice way to kind of force your opponent's hand, because you attack with Ravis, even if your opponent has a huge forward bigger than Ravis, chances are it's going to die with both Noctis and Ravis on the field, because it blocks Ravis, he gets to then minus 5,000 that forward. If it still isn't dead, using Noctis to bring Ravis back onto the field to then minus 5,000 that forward again means that it's probably going to die. Or, you know, even better, if it blocks and Ravis kills the forward that blocked it, and then he leaves the field, you get to do minus 5k to another forward, and then use Noctis to then either deal minus 5k to that same forward, or another forward. You know, it's just loads of great ways to be able to combo Noctis and Ravis together, and Ravis is very strong, because having minus 5,000 as standard both on entry and leaving is really good, and he is a high cost forward, and he does have that quite cool ability of when a captain is put from field into the break zone, he costs a lot less as well. So that works with the other 15 lightning forward that is little, he is a 2 CP, I can't remember his name, Glauca, there we go. So if Glauca dies, Ravis only becomes 1 CP as well, so pretty good. Arden, yeah, I mean Arden, on the face of it sounds like an incredible card, but then it turns out that your opponent can just select one character they control in the break zone as many times as they want. So even if they have no forwards or backups or any characters whatsoever, or let's say you discard, when you play Arden into the field, you discard 7 cards and they have 5 characters, they just choose 7 characters, but they only have 5, so, you know, it's really beneficial for them to do that. But Arden is ultimately a good late game card, because your opponent isn't going to want to choose the damage, isn't going to want to mill themselves 20 cards, especially if it's a very late game, and if you are being forced and you play Arden and you do discard something like 7 cards and they have 7 characters, which late game would be, you know, probably a full backup lineup and a couple of big hefty forwards, wiping your opponent's board is devastating. It's not just wiping like their forwards, it's wiping their backups as well, which is disgusting. And what's even better about this is that it puts it into the break zone. It's not breaking those forwards. So any forwards that are like, oh, I can't be broken, doesn't matter. They are just put from the field to the break zone. And having Noctis there with Arden in the break zone means that your opponent has to constantly consider that, because if, say, on your opponent's turn, you get a couple of nice EXs and you get a couple of more cards to hand, and then you enter your turn with, say, I don't know, 9 cards, your opponent's going to be, oh god, when he plays Arden on the field, he's going to have to discard 9 cards, which means you get to pick 10 characters to be, you know, broken. Or even if they only have a few points of damage, even taking, you know, 3 or 4 points of damage, they still have a lot of characters to break. So yeah, it's having these two kind of paired together is scary and can put a lot of pressure on your opponent. Alright, Faris. When Faris enters the field, choose up to 2 forwards in your break zone. If the total of their power is 3,000, play them onto the field. And then Pirate Storm, which is a mouthful, S and Fire. Choose any number of forwards. Deal them a total amount of damage equal to 5,000 multiplied by each forward of cost 3 less than you control. Split as you wish among the chosen forwards. Damage must be increments of 1,000. Oh, that makes my brain hurt, but ultimately it means that you can take 5,000, times it by how many forwards you have of 3 or less, and then just divvy out the damage. That's not really what I care about at the moment. I'm talking more about her entry ability, which is also kind of strange, because it's if their total power is 3,000, play onto the field. So it means you can play 1 forward of 3,000 power, or 2 forwards of 1,000 and 2,000 power. You cannot play 1 forward of 2,000 power or 1,000 power, or, you know, 2 forwards of 1,000 power. It has to equate to 3,000 power, which is a strange restriction, but, you know, ultimately it's not the end of the world. So Zidane, and the good thing about Faris as well is that it doesn't have to be in color, so you could be mono fire just with Zidane thrown in the deck, and you play Faris to bring in Zidane, and it doesn't matter if Zidane keeps dying. In fact, it makes your opponent not want to kill Zidane even more, so he actually becomes a fairly effective blocker, because if you have a means of reviving him and just keep on playing him, that's not nice at all. Ilua. So obviously Faris costs quite a bit anyway, so you won't have too many fire backups available ready to use Ilua, so you probably want to play out of hand, but you might have ways of cheating Faris in as well, say through something like what's his name, Red 13, or just paying, you know, basically out of hand to then play Ilua onto the field. He'll have haste, and you can dial as many backups as you want to then kill some things, as well as hopefully getting some damage through. Vikings in general. That is what Faris is based on. She is a pirate after all. So yeah, you play Faris, so then choose Layla to play onto the field. Now the good thing about Faris is the fact that it's based on the power, not on the cost of the card. So you can have some fairly high costed cards, but as long as they're 3,000 power, bring them onto the field. And generally the higher cost they are, the better value they are. So you can play Layla onto the field to then play a Viking, which might reveal from your deck to play more Vikings or draw you cards. Or ultimately you can just choose a couple of Vikings. I mean, the 3-cost one which draws on both entry and leaving the field, and another one that just on entry. You can play both of those with Faris as well, so you just draw 2 cards from playing Faris effectively, which is really, really good. Obviously they're tiny forwards, which means that they're only really useful for blocking, but still very useful for a bit more consistency in your deck. Chocobo Knight, yeah, so I like actually running a bit of fire with Bobos because it gives them a bit more aggression that they kind of lack sometimes, and it means that you can throw in, you know, Ifrits or things like that, just to, if you've got any, your opponent's got big forwards that you can't get rid of, it's dead now. But yeah, being able to use Chocobo Knight and revive that from the break zone, so search you some more Chocobos to find that one Chocobo you need to really push for game, will be very useful as well. And then Chocobo, so say you've got a 4 CP Chocobo in hand, you play Faris onto the field to grab this Chocobo to then play Chocobo onto the field, you know, just a bit more consistency and allows you to push a bit more as well. Boko and Barts, so you can bring Boko onto the field, but if you already have Barts there, it means that you can give him haste as well as being able to attack with Boko as well, because Barts gives Boko haste. You can party attack, find yourself another 1 CP forward, bring that onto the field, and obviously 1 CP forwards generally have quite low power, so it works nicely with something like Faris, so she can still revive those forwards. So you're not just stealing from your deck with Barts, you're also stealing from your break zone to bring all these little forwards onto the break zone for Barts to give haste. Not to mention the fact that both Faris and Barts also Warriors of Light, so it could be a little small kind of Warrior of Light, maybe Chocobo standard unit style deck, which you know, quite fun. Then Zidane and Suzuhisa. Suzuhisa is really just any card to try and find that fits with a 2k forward. Zidane ultimately is a nice little push. If you're able to play Faris and then bring in Zidane and your opponent doesn't have any active boards to block with, or a means of killing Zidane, even though he's very easy to kill, that can mean big trouble for your opponent. And ultimately, having Suzuhisa on the field as well, it means that when any auto ability is triggered by your opponent, you get 2 cards to hand, which is still pretty decent as well. I actually quite like Suzuhisa just because it's more cards in hand. Alright, Ace. Again, another weird card. 4 CP light forward. You can only cast up to 2 cards per turn. You can cast forwards from your break zone. If a card is put into the break zone in any situation, remove it from the game instead. And when Ace enters the field, discard your hand. Yeesh. Yeah, so just to clear things up here a bit, if anything is put into the break zone in any form whatsoever, it's removed from the game. You're paying for something with discarding out of hand, it's removed from the game. When Ace enters and makes you discard your hand, it's removed from the game. So you need to be very careful, and you also want to play Ace with a full backup lineup so that you have the means of playing things from your break zone onto the key. Again, similar to Arden, he is a late game card, so you can then start pulling from that pool of cards. But you need to be careful obviously of things like Miss Dragon. So Edge, this is an interesting card. So he's got back attack, which means that you can still cast him from your break zone on your opponent's turn. But what's interesting here is that Edge says you can only pay with CP produced by wind backups to play Edge from your hand onto the field. That's from your hand. Ace allows you to play Edge from your break zone, so that means you don't have to pay with only wind CP or wind backups even. Obviously there has to be some wind CP in there, like when you pay for these cards you still have to produce the correct CP elements, but his back attack, so that means he can be played at any point, and you only have to pay the 1 wind CP to be able to play him. You don't have to worry about that restriction because he's not in your hand, which is kind of funny. And he can ultimately choose a forward and deal it 4k, so if your opponent attacks with a big forward, you can play Edge, back attack onto the field, and then deal that forward 4k and block with Edge, so he ultimately is blocking for 11k, which is pretty decent. Or you can use him to buff another Final Fantasy 4 forward as well. Palom, when Palom enters the field other than from your hand, choose 1 forward, it may deal it 7,000 damage. So similar sort of thing to Edge, and you know, again, they're both Final Fantasy 4 characters, so they kind of work together as well. You can use Edge to buff Palom if you really wanted to. But yeah, ultimately, the fact that you can just play Palom from your break zone onto the field, deal something 7k, only 3 CP is not too bad, you know, that's a decent kind of summon, I guess. And it just adds a bit more consistency, and you can use Palom's S ability very effectively as well in this style of deck, so being able to just retrieve stuff from your break zone, bring them back onto the field. Now you do need to be careful because when Palom or Porum die, they are going to be removed from the game, but being that you're probably in water as well, it means that you can bounce things back to your hand to safety. So if it is going to die and get put in the break zone and therefore removed, just bounce things back to your hand to replay them. Alcid. So Ace does have the stipulation that you can only cast 2 cards per turn, which is a massive restriction. So hypothetically, if you were to play Ace and then another forward, that's it. Similar with the Opus 15 Mind Flayer. If you were to cast that card, and then, you know, take a card from your opponent's deck and cast that card, that's your 2 cards cast already. Same with Lanny as well. So you need to be mindful of how you're casting, because it's really going to screw with your deck. But being able to play Alcid from your break zone onto the field to then play something onto the field is really, really good. Obviously, he's playing it from your hand as well, so it's a bit more consistency of taking from one area and then playing from another. So it's almost like you've got 2 separate hands, which I kind of guess the point, because, you know, Ace uses cards. This is where the stipulation between cast and play happens. So I get a lot of people asking about this and get quite confused over the differences. When you cast something, you are effectively revealing the card and saying, I am going to cast this card and paying the cost for it. This is one of the reasons that the Opus 14, 13 Rosa doesn't work as the 3rd or 5th cast when you play her. To cast something, casting happens before the card enters the field. So you are basically, casting is just you saying, I'm playing this card and I'm paying the cost. It is then cast and then enters the field. Something cannot enter the field unless it is cast. But you then have things at play, so something like Alcid. So what that does is it's just playing it from your hand. You don't have to cast because you're not paying a cost associated with it. So it just enters the field. When you cast something, it is also played. When you play something, it is not also cast. Okay, I hope that doesn't confuse people too much, but by casting something, you're paying the cost, it is then played onto the field. If you're playing something, it just comes onto the field, there was no cast involved there. Alright? So think of cast means cost. Played just means played. Yeah, cast, cost, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, awkward. But either way, Alcid coming onto the field from your break zone to then play something from your hand, super good. Lanny. So as I mentioned before, you need to be careful because you are playing Lanny and then you play, or you cast a card from your opponent's deck. Those are your 2 cards cast, so you're kind of done already. But you get to keep that card there at any point, and you can cast it whenever you want. Well, on any of your turns. It's not like Mind Flayer where if you end the turn, that card's just removed from the game. You can use Lanny whenever you so choose. You can use the card that Lanny steals whenever you so choose, provided, you know, it's legal. But what's really good about this is the fact that you're stealing from your opponent's deck as well, so you're removing some of your opponent's deck while some of your things also getting removed as well. Because remember, if anything is removed or anything enters the break zone, it is removed from game. So if you are discarding to play Lanny, those cards discarded are removed from the game. If you're breaking it back up to do something, then that gets removed from the game. So you need to be careful of that. But ultimately, making sure that some of your opponent's deck is being whittled away as well and using your cards against them is pretty decent. Yuna. Yeah, Yuna is a good card because it means that anytime one of your opponent's characters is put from the field into the break zone, you can make sure that's removed as well. So your opponent is in a similar boat to you. If anything you control is put from the field into the break zone, it's removed. But the same now applies to your opponent as well, so they have to be more mindful of when their forwards and backups are breaking as well. Arc. I really like this card. When Arc enters the field, choose up to 3 job standard unit or job Warrior of Light. Activate them. And at damage 3, when Arc enters the field, choose 1 job standard unit or job Warrior of Light of cost 3 or less in your break zone. Play it onto the field. So, and he's got an EX for the reactivation as well, which is good. To be able to reactivate 3 things is pretty decent. Now, he is 5 CP and he is 8k. So, you know, it's not too over curve given that he gets a lot of, kind of value from entering the field, especially at damage 3. So pairing him with something like Hope is actually pretty decent because it means that when Arc enters the field and you reactivate something, if you've got 5 backups, you can actually activate all of your backups using Arc and Hope together. You know, you can also activate your forwards as well, or you can stack things. So you could reactivate a backup which you want to use as dull effect, you dull it, and then from the trigger for Hope you can then reactivate that backup again to then dull it again if you so choose. Okay, exactly. So obviously there's kind of a focus here of reactivating your forwards. What's good is that at damage 3, when Arc plays a Warrior of Light or Standard unit, they can also be backups. So it's a nice way to be able to add some consistency to your deck and get things like Exali onto the field ready for when you want to play something like Bismarck or Garuda. And also being able to reactivate stuff like Exali, so then transferring that into reactivating your forwards that aren't standard units or Warriors of Light is just pretty decent, to be honest. Chokerbone Eye! Yeah, I mean, Ark's got a Chocobo in his photo, so obviously he works nicely with those. Being able to, one, bring Chocobo Knight from your break zone onto the field and search stuff for Chocobo is excellent, or being able to dull Chocobo to play a Chocobo onto the field, and then using Ark to reactivate that Chocobo Knight and dulling him again to play even more Chocobos. It's just great, man. Just great. Lena. So Ark can play Lena onto the field, and if you have 2 crystals, you can play another 3 CP forward from your break zone onto the field, because Lena is a warrior of light, which is good. If you have 3 crystals, you can actually play 1 2 CP forward or less, or 1 3 CP forward as well. So playing Ark, reactivate backups, play Lena, play 2 forwards. Pretty good. Okay, Dragoon. When Dragoon enters the field, you may reveal any number of Dragoon or card named Dragoon from your hand. When you reveal 1 or more, Dragoon gains haste until the end of the turn. In addition, when you reveal 4 or more, choose 1 forward, break it. So, very standard in Dragoon decks these days. But with Opus 15, we now have a couple of Wind Dragoons, and it actually kind of works, to be honest. Having the Cane and the Crystal generating Wind backup isn't too bad at all. And I've actually seen someone play Philo, the new backup, because she herself can generate both water and wind, which means that she works excellently in a Dragoons deck, because now you have water and wind Dragoons that are kind of just like this little niche pocket of a mainly lightning Dragoon deck. Being able to play Ark onto the field to play Dragoon from your break zone with lost Dragoons in hand is really, really useful. And obviously most of the Dragoon backups are standard units, so you can use Ark to reactivate those as well, to then, you know, break them to do more things as well. Or just play more Dragoons if you really want to, because that is one of the key things with Dragoons, is swarm your opponent's field. And the more reactivation and kind of consistency you get from that, the more your opponent's going to really struggle. Dusk. Similar to Lena, really. You play Ark onto the field, to then play Dusk onto the field, to then pay the 1 water, to then play something else from your hand onto the field. What's good is that you can stack it as well, so that Ark, he reactivates things before bringing in Dusk, so that even if you've used all of your backups, you make sure that you get that 1 water CP, so you can dull that then on Dusk's entry ability. And finally, we have Mont Leonis. So he's an 11 CP forward, which is pretty big, but he's got some really, really strong abilities, as I mentioned earlier. So the cost required to cast Mont Leonis is reduced by 1 for each Earth character you control. So he can become 0 as well if you have 11 characters. When Mont Leonis enters the field, choose 1 Earth forward of cost 6 or less in your break zone, play it onto the field. So imagine that, paying 0 for Mont Leonis to then get a 6 CP from your break zone onto the field directly. And then finally, when Mont Leonis is put from the field into the break zone, during this turn, the next damage is dealt to you becomes 0 instead. And that's an ability that gets overlooked a lot because his entry ability is so pretty darn good. But I really like his leave the field ability as well, which works nicely with Zodiac. As I've mentioned this before, but I'll go over it again. Let's say your opponent attacks with a forward, you block with Mont Leonis, and he's put from the field into the break zone. You could then cast Zodiac and break all of your opponent's forwards. Now, if you break all the forwards opponent controls, you receive damage equal to the number of forwards broken by this effect. However, because it's considered 1 pocket of damage, it means that actually you take no damage if Mont Leonis has been put from the field into the break zone, because it's the next damage you receive, and the next damage you receive would be multiple points, so you receive nothing. It works really, really well. And just having that pocket Zodiac, your opponent's got massive amounts of forwards, and you block Mont Leonis, it's 1 like tiny little forward, he gets put from the field into the break zone. Now you can cast Zodiac, even if you're paying the full 7 CP, to break all of your opponent's forwards. Woof, that's pretty powerful. Regis, I mean, we went over this already, but, you know, Regis you can bring in through something like Noctis, but you can also bring him in through something like Mont Leonis as well, which is super strong. Yeah, again, you use something like Kefka to break your forwards, and then you use Mont Leonis to bring in Regis. I mean, they work excellently together because they basically target each other to bring each other in as well, so you've got a nice little kind of cycle going there. Wall, again, similar to earlier. Mont Leonis being able to bring in Wall, to be able to bring in Yasmat or Braska's Final Aeon, you know, that's just crazy good. And again, Wall can play something completely out of colour, so you might only have Braska's Final Aeon as your only fire card in your hand, because it's such a good card. Being able to play it through Wall, why wouldn't you? I mean, it's just excellent. Ishtola, I mean, you can have a lot of Earth Scions in a Scion deck, and being able to play Mont Leonis to then grab Ishtola to then play more Scions is just really powerful. But I wonder, you could play Ishtola onto the field, and if you can get to 11 Scions on your field, if there are that many, I'm not sure that there are. Let's try and count this. So, Ishtola, Alphino, Alize, I want to say Ida probably because it's Earth, Papalimo, Thancred, Mr. Thou, I forget his name. Oh, I like him as well. I can't remember his name, but that dude. Oh, that's 7. Oh, can you get to 11? I don't think there are 11. Oh, Kryl. Are there 11? Are there 11 Scions? Well, if there are 11 Scions, then you could potentially grab Mont Leonis out of your break zone onto the field with Y'shtola, which would be hilarious, to be honest. And ultimately, you're an Earth, so, you know, just have Hashmal. Play Hashmal onto the field, or not onto the field, cast Hashmal even, and make the forwards that aren't Scions, Scions. And then play Y'shtola, and then grab Mont Leonis to play something else, because that's just kind of funny. Tifa. So, obviously there's a lot of Earth in a 7 deck, especially this variant of the 7 deck. And you could probably go a mono Earth with a 7 deck now if you really wanted to. But one of the problems with this Tifa is getting her back onto the field. Now, obviously Kuchaspel is excellent because you cast Kuchaspel, grab Tifa, play Tifa again. It's fine. And her cost is reduced by 1 if you do have a card named Cloud. The problem is if you're using something like Kuchaspel, if you cast that, that's actually 4 CP because you've got 2 CP for Kuchaspel and Kuchaspel itself. And then you get Tifa back to hand. And if you're still paying only 4 CP for Tifa, that's 4 CP and then Tifa herself. So you are paying a total of 10 CP for that. Whereas you could just cast Mont Leonis for 10 CP and gain 2 forwards from it. You know, that's much better in my opinion because you're getting Tifa straight onto the field with Mont Leonis, and you've got Mont Leonis there who's also a forward. But the chances are you'll have a lot more Earth characters as well. So you've got obviously the Opus 14 Cloud, who's Earth, he's very strong. Barrett, Biggs, Wedge, Jesse, and then all the other backups you might have as well. So being able to reduce Mont Leonis' cost quite significantly to make sure that you can get Tifa from your break zone onto the field, just really good. And of course, Tifa is such a chase card and hard to come by. Having some sort of recursion might be good because it can be hard to get 3 of this card. Cecil, when it's field, choose one dull for opponent's controls. If it is cost equal to or less than the number of damage you've received, break it. So that's just nice to be able to have an outright break effect. But also his S ability, choose one forward. Cecil deals you 1 point of damage. If the cost of the forward is equal to or less than the damage you've received, break it. Again, works nicely with Mont Leonis, because if Mont Leonis has died this turn, you can use Cecil's S ability without having to take the damage, but still breaking it forward. Obviously, you need to make sure that the damage of the forward you're targeting, or sorry, your damage equals the cost of the forward you're targeting. If you did require that point of damage to kill it, then you've kind of screwed yourself there. But yeah, being able to use Mont Leonis, you know, sack him off for whatever reason, using Cecil's S, then kill a forward, still works nicely. Ursula, I mean, yeah, more recursion. Use Mont Leonis to recur Ursula, to then recur Sophie, Sarah, I can't remember her name. They're both the same card. I mean, they're both Earth, Water, and I can never remember. They always get played together. But yeah, ultimately using Mont Leonis to get Ursula, to get a monk onto the field. And, you know, monks are almost entirely Earth. You've got a couple of fire ones now, especially with the new, forget his name, Joseph. But he doesn't really work in monks anyway, just he is a job monk. But anyway, I'm getting down the rabbit hole. Yeah, this works nicely to be able to play things onto the field for free. Alright, there we go, chums. Another episode done and dusted. What do you guys think of the combos this week? I think there's some pretty... I mean, the infinite combo. Hilarious. I mean... I've always been a massive fan of Mill. And Mill will be a thing, I promise you. I mean, it's a very strong ability is the problem. And that... having something like Riku that got banned was just too powerful because of the sheer reactivation, but there are still ways to be able to make Mill work, and that's a clear example of one. Now, being able to get that infinite combo to constantly keep going is kind of hard, to be fair, but there are definitely ways to do it. I mean, you only have to be in 3 different elements, Ice, Lightning, and Earth, and they're 3 elements that work nicely together anyway, and ultimately you don't have to be in those elements either. You can force like something like the Lightning and Regis. Ultimately you don't have to be in Lightning because you're going to be playing it through something like Noctis, so there's ways to cheat him in very easily, or through Mont Leonis. You know, there's just excellent ways to be able to do it. So, you know, excellent fun things. Let me know what some of the fun combos that you guys have been testing out recently. Opus 15, sorry, has some crazy things on there. I think the next deck I'm going to build is probably a Dragoons deck. Dragoons are very consistent. I don't tend to normally go that meta, but trying to throw in the water and the wind at the same time sounds like a lot of fun. I think I'm going to give that a go. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, guys. Stay safe, be lucky. I'll see you in the next one.